Firstly, the question in 1 John 1 verse 5, it suggests, of course, the suggestion that God cannot have anything to do with darkness. There is no darkness in God. Now, just because there is no darkness in God, it doesn't mean that God can't have anything to do with darkness, in the sense that God can't interact with people in darkness. In the Bible, there are other locations in the Bible that talk about Satan the devil, who we've already discussed does not exist, being in God's company. Now that would suggest that God can interact with people who are in darkness. So it's not accurate to state that God cannot interact with people who are in darkness. Now, this woman is suggesting that in order to fellowship with us, he must have atonement for man's sin. However, in the Bible record in Job, God did not require atonement for Satan's sin, and under the Christian definition, Satan's sin is the worst possible sin that anyone has ever committed, and yet God could converse with Satan directly. Now, if God can converse with Satan directly, surely God can converse with any other person who's a sinner directly. Right? So it's totally illogical from the teachings of the Bible itself to believe that God cannot spend time with sinners. Also, if we examine it from another perspective, and that is this: most Christians believe that Jesus is God. And yet in the Bible it says quite categorically that Jesus spent time with sinners. Now, if Jesus was God and Jesus spent time with sinners, then it means God can spend time with sinners.
Yeah.
And this happened before Jesus gave the sacrifice.
Yeah.
So therefore it didn't need Jesus' sacrifice in order for Jesus, God, to spend time with sinners. So again, it makes no logical sense, this reasoning. So if we examine some of the Bible verses that talk about that, in Luke 7, it talks about the woman who was a sinner who washed Jesus' feet. So she touched Jesus. She touched God, according to the Christians.
Yeah.
And yet that was allowed, and Jesus interacted with this woman, right, with freedom, and therefore proving that God could interact with people before Jesus atoned, before the death of Jesus. Now, if God could do it before the death of Jesus, and God did it after the death of Jesus, then what was the point of the death of Jesus? Well, there was no point. The death of Jesus did not create what these people assume, which is the atonement of sin, because the reality is, before Jesus' death, God could reside with badness, God could speak with people who were bad. That didn't mean God was bad, he could just speak with them, right? And God did speak with them according to the Bible. And then Jesus, when he was on earth before he died, he spoke with people who were bad, which means that there was no need for Jesus to sacrifice himself in order to speak with people, for God to be with people that were bad. So the presumption here that she says in her question, so in order to have fellowship with us, God must have atonement for man's sin, is incorrect. God does not need atonement for man's sin in order to fellowship with sinners. Just because God fellowships with sinners, it doesn't make God a sinner. There's verses in the Bible that state this, interestingly enough. Like, here's one. In Matthew 11, for example, it says in 18 and 19, "For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say, he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners." So here it's saying, in the Bible itself, that Jesus was a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Now, if Jesus was God, then God was a friend of tax collectors and sinners, and God did not need Jesus' sacrifice in order to be a friend of tax collectors and sinners.
So basically you're showing that the Christian belief system is flawed. If they believe in the atonement and believe in the scripture, they actually contradict each other.
Exactly. They're totally contradictory to each other. By believing in one, you contradict the other. And so this is where, like, I find many contradictions in the Christian belief systems. There are more contradictions in the Christian belief system than there is in the Bible itself. Because if a person actually believes what the Bible says, there would not be as many contradictions. But there are more contradictions in the Christian belief system than the Bible itself contains. Now, in John 4, verse 6 and 7, this is what it says. It says that, just get it.
14. 14, John 14.
Oh, 14, sorry, that's right. Yeah, looking at the wrong thing. 14, 6 and 7, it says, Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really knew me, you would know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. So what I was saying there, and I did say those words, is that because I was at one with God, every action that I took was the kind of action that my Father would take.
Yeah.
Everything that I did was the kind of thing my Father would do. This was while I was alive. These things were what I would do and what my Father would do while I was alive. Now, if I sat down and let my feet be washed by a sinner, I can certainly have association with darkness.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I am dark. It means that I am interacting with a person who may be in different condition. Now, if we take that verse to be literal, and most Christians do, then that means then that I showed what God was like. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm showing what God was like. In showing what God was like, I was demonstrating that God could interact with sinners, just as I could interact with sinners, before my death.
And you're also you're also saying that the Christian belief is that you were God, and if you follow that doctrine, then it's demonstrated that God can be with sinners.
Because my actions were I was with sinners, yes.
But you and I know the truth that you weren't God.
No.
But you were at one with God, so you mirrored his feelings and beliefs and
So no matter
desires,
what thing you believe about what my nature or character was,
you still spent time with sinners.
And therefore God could spend time with sinners.
Yes. Yeah.
So therefore God did not need any atonement sacrifice in order to spend time with sinners. Mm-hmm. Right? So I'm using the logic from the Bible here. Of course, I feel the Bible is flawed. But even using its own logic, God could spend time with sinners before Jesus died.
Yes.
And if God could do that before Jesus died, and God could do that after Jesus died, what was the point of Jesus' death? None, nothing, no, nothing whatsoever. And that is true. The truth is I didn't die for any atonement reason.
Yeah.
That is an underlying truth.
Yeah.
So if I am truly God and I spent time with sinners on earth, then it's possible for a person who's in a condition of light to spend time in darkness without being affected by the darkness. Mm-hmm. And that is true. Mm-hmm. That is a very basic understanding and a very basic truth that we need to understand. We can be surrounded by darkness and still be light ourselves.
Isn't inherent in this question the implication that God is our parent who is perfect, but by implication in the statement it's saying that the perfect parent can somehow be affected or restricted from communing with the imperfect child.
Exactly.
And
it's a ludicrous proposition if you think about it.
Yeah.
Like it's basically saying that a person who is the most powerful person in the universe is restricted by his own laws to interacting with a person who has decided to walk away from him. Mm. And it's not true. How can it be true? Now, the reverse could be true. The person who's walked away from God is now restricted from having a relationship with God, but not through any choice of God, but rather through the choice of the individual. Yes. Very, very different. Very different. You see, it's almost like Christians want to blame God for the sacrifice, the atonement sacrifice. It's a very warped concept that is not based on any logical discussion whatsoever, but also is based upon a lot of very harmful beliefs about God. It's based on a lot of very harmful projections towards God. And I'm not saying that they harm God, they harm the individual because they believe God to be this person. How could God ever be such a person? If you had almighty power of the universe, who are you restricted from talking to in this universe? The answer is no one. No one, no matter what their choices and decision, you can still commune with them.
Yeah.
Whether they can commune with you is a different matter altogether based on their condition.
Yeah.
But you would be able to commune with them. God has unlimited and unrestricted power, even with God's laws, and God can commune with any person, whether they're, sinner or not a sinner, doesn't matter. God can commune, spend time with us in any state if we're open to such communication, if we're open to such a relationship. No matter what state we're in, we can be open to such relationship and God will engage the relationship. So, also in the Old Testament of the Bible, it's suggested that different people spent time with God. Now, under the Christian belief structure, that would not be possible. But in the Old Testament, it suggests that people did spend time with God. So which is it that's true? Again, the logic is flawed.
Sure.
So we need to understand this basic problem with this logic, this concept that God needs an atonement of sin in order to commune with people is a flawed concept based from very, very old concepts about God, of being a punishing, wrathful God, needing sacrifice needing blood, really, in order to communicate and to favour humankind. And it's based around fear, huge amounts of fear, in fact, this concept of God. And we would never consider that an individual who sacrifices his own child needed to do so in order to prove his love to us. And yet, we do almost demand of God that he sacrificed Jesus, his own beloved child, according to our belief systems, in order for us to have a relationship with God. And it's a very flawed concept. And it's flawed on a number of areas. Why did Jesus deserve the sacrifice? Why did he deserve that treatment? He doesn't deserve that treatment. What about him? What about his feelings in the matter?
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people then say, but he was a part of God and all that. But that's not true. But even if he was a part of God, it makes no sense at all. If he was a part of God, then God already had it.
Yes.
Why does God need to do something that creates a lot of pain when God already had what he was wanting to do?
Yeah.
Again, it makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
So this flawed concept of the atonement sacrifice, the blood sacrifice, the vicarious sacrifice, causing and allowing a relationship between God and mankind, it is so flawed on so many levels, logically and from a loving perspective, that it's amazing, I believe, that people can even believe it. Now, interestingly enough, in my own life, in this life, due to some history of I did believe it for a period of time. And I go, wow, how flawed was my concept of love. Once I gave up this concept of love, that love requires sacrifice, I could not accept it after that point. Could not accept it. And I suggest that most Christians will not be able to accept it once they have a different viewpoint of love. So that's the first point I'd like to make.